Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. We're going to take a look at another World Blitz game. This time it was between Daniil Dubov versus Firouzja. And it was a bit of a weird game. And yeah, Dubov played some really weird moves, and to be honest, Firouzja just took advantage of them. So it was a King's Indian anyway. So it was d4, knight to f6, knight to f3, g6, g3, and both sides fianchetto the bishops, and both sides castle. Standard stuff so far with Firouzja playing d6. But then Dubov goes in for a really weird move. He plays a4. I'm not sure what the intention is with this move. Maybe he shouldn't limit Black's queenside expansion. But it just looks very dodgy, and the computer absolutely hates this move. Firouzja played knight b to d7, and again, playing a typical move in this position. And Dubov again pushed his pawn further one step. So I suppose it limits the knight jumping in to b6. Maybe even limits playing b6 as well. So it's an interesting idea, but I'm not sure if it works. Firouzja just calmly plays c6, so holds on to his own structure in the centre, not pushing his pawns too far. And now b3. Again, a very weird move. Obviously the intention is to play bishop to b2 and support the d4 pawn and prepare against e5. But I think Dubov maybe miscalculated what happens if Firouzja just goes straight in for e5, which is what happened in the game. Because after takes and takes, Black's bishop looks kind of dangerous already, eyeing up the a1 rook. And then he plays another weird move, knight f to d2. So probably preempting the idea that Black will probably play e4, to be honest. But maybe bishop to b2 may have been better, I'm not quite sure. Firouzja though just gains more space, he plays e4. The pawn is supported by the knight, so obviously Dubov can't take this because then takes, bishop takes, the bishop will pick up the rook on a1. So in this position he played knight to c4. I guess he was scared also in this position. Black may be able to just sack this pawn as well if, let's say, rook a2, maybe even e3 looks quite good here. It takes, I guess white's structure is completely destroyed. He didn't actually have to push that pawn though, but it looks really tempting to do so. So yeah, Dubov played knight c4 in the game. Firouzja played knight to d5, so eyeing up the rook on a1. And I think straight away maybe here Dubov should have just accepted defeat and played rook a2 straight away. Knight c5 looks really nice for Black, but it's better than what happened in the game, because in the game he played rook to a4, and now he just gets harassed. Knight c5 with tempo, has to move the rook back to a2 again. Knight b4 comes in, hits the rook again, and at this point he just gives up and says, okay, you can have that rook if you want it so desperately. Bishop to a3 was played, there was a trade of queens, and yeah, Dubov loses his rook, which was on a2 for this knight. So bishop takes c5, Dubov sacrifices the exchange. I guess it was a good idea to do, especially in a blitz game. It's double-edged, but it's not looking too good for white. So rook e8 to move away from that bishop on c5, and bishop takes e4. So okay, white gains the exchange and a pawn. The point being is that if rook takes e4 here, there's rook to d8 check, bishop f8 should only move, then bishop takes f8, will be swiftly followed by checkmate on h6, and white's going to win. So after bishop takes, Firouzja just played bishop to h3, developing and connecting the two rooks, and bishop to g2 was played. Yeah, it's now possible. In the game, Firouzja played bishop g4. It was possible to actually take this though, bishop takes g2. I know what he was worried about, king takes g2. If rook takes, knight to e3 looks quite scary, as if the rook's going to get trapped. But luckily, Black did have this resource, bishop h6, because after king takes, it's a bit of a trick of the mind here, because bishop takes e3 looks really bad. But the point being is now the knight's taken off, the rook can take on c2. And if king takes rook, then bishop takes c5, and Black shows the whole piece up in a one endgame. So bishop takes g2 was possible. Instead he played bishop g4, attacking e2. a6 was now played, so white's trying to gain some counter attack. Firouzja shuts this down with b6. The bishop drops back to e3, But it does drop a pawn on e2, so Firouzja took on e2. There's rook to d2, and now there's just a trade. Bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, and rook a8 to protect his c6 pawn. And it was quite desperate for white, to be honest now. He played c3. The rook's attacking the knights on a2. But this allows black to take, and knight takes, bishop takes, and rook to d7. So if we count material, black's a pawn and exchange up. Okay, white just has the two bishops, but it's not looking too good. Rook to d8, offering the exchange. Dubov takes on a7. So trying to get a potential queen. It does look quite scary for black because the two bishops are raking down the board here. But black does have some counter-attacking chances of their own. For instance, rook d1 is what Firouzja played, forcing the bishop back. And now rook to a1, getting behind the a6 pawn to stop white getting a queen. King g2 to unpin his bishop, but now c5 just locks everything in, protects this b6 pawn, and these two are becoming very strong. I think Firouzja's idea is to play bishop to d4. Bishop to d3 was played, and Firouzja plays a nice sneaky move, rook to a2, threatening to take on e3 because the pawn on f2 is pinned. So Dubov unpins his king, but now comes bishop to d4 and forces an exchange. So after takes, and bishop to e4. This is looking quite bad for white now. This check was thrown in, king f4, and Firouzja plays d3 to try and get their own queen. Yeah, and even if Dubov decided to play rook d7 here to get behind the pawn, there's rook takes a6, the pawn drops off. Okay, white can win back this pawn, but after b5 isn't quite a nice move, because after c takes b5, black could have played this move, rook to a4. Two rooks attack the bishop. If the rook defends it, then f5 comes, and white's going to lose that game. So after d3, rook to d7 just loses, as we just saw. Bishop d5 was played instead. Dubov is going for tactics here with like rook takes f7, but I don't really think there's anything here for white. It's just sort of a hope here. He played d2 from Firouzja. Bishop takes f7 was played, king f8. The bishop dropped back to d5. Maybe he's hoping for some rook f7 ideas, but there's nothing there. d1 queen, rook f7 check was played. King went to g8, rook to e7, and the point is now the queen can just take. After queen takes the bishop, rook takes e8 is pretty much forced, and then king f7, and Dubov resigned here because if white takes the queen, then black will just take the rook, and it's GG. There's not really much you can do. These two pawns will be taken, that's game. So a very interesting and weird game from Dubov. Firouzja just played solidly, and it's all like Dubov capitulated a bit, and black just used their advantage of this long bishop. Yeah, this a pawn push was very weird, and the harassment of this rook just sort of cost Dubov the game. But anyway, that was my analysis of a Blitz game. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully if you did, please do drop a like, comment or subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in another video. So everyone stay safe. Thank you.